Good afternoon. I am Matt Fruman, Ward 3 Council Member and Chairperson of the Committee on Human Services. Today is Thursday, December 18th, 2025. We are meeting in room 500 of the John A. Wilson Building and on the Zoom virtual platform. The time is now 1:05 p.m. Today, we are conducting a public hearing on B26-0490, the Library e-book Pricing Fairness Amendment Act of 2025. Along with Council members Allen, Felder, Henderson, Louis George, Nadeau, Pinto, and Robert White, I introduced B26-0490, the e-book Pricing Fairness Amendment Act of 2025 on November 17th, 2025. The bill helps the District of Columbia Public Library, or DCPL, increase district residents' access to electronic books and materials. It does this by strengthening the hand of DCPL and other libraries around the country in entering into licensing agreements that are less restrictive or not restrictive of public access to ebooks and audiobooks that often have arbitrary lending clauses and steep price increases. In the last 5 years, demand for ebooks and audiobooks has increased significantly. At the same time, prices set by publishers have made it harder for libraries to keep enough copies available to meet demand. Publishers often use their market power to raise prices on new and popular titles, require libraries to repurchase the same ebooks every few months, and impose time limits on borrowing. Some publisher contracts also prevent libraries from sharing pricing information with one another, restricting open communication and collaboration. In practice, this means DCPL is paying escalating costs, but fewer books are available to the public. And residents are waiting longer for a smaller selection of books. In fiscal year 2024, the average price of an ebook license rose from $60 to $75, and audio book licenses increased from $85 to $120. At the same time, the average wait times for ebooks and audiobooks increased to more than a month. DCPL serves hundreds of thousands of residents. When publishers squeeze the library's circulation budget, it affects all patrons. That includes everyone from families visiting their neighborhood branch for children's books to residents relying on digital accessibility features. The library cannot absorb continually rising costs driven by publisher pricing practices. This bill addresses those unfair practices by prohibiting renewal of licensing agreements that drive up costs and wait times. Importantly, this bill will take effect only after at least 10 other jurisdictions with a combined total population of at least 50 million people enact similar policies. The strategy ensures that the district is acting as part of a national effort. Several states are in the process of passing in their own legislation, which accomplishes the same goal of banding together to protect local libraries. This concerted effort reduces the risk of legal challenges or market isolation. Today, I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about how rising ebook costs are affecting libraries and residents, and how DCPL has experienced these challenges here in the district. I want to thank Kyle Courtney and the eBook Study Group for developing the model legislation that inspired this bill. I'm also grateful to the American Library Association, the DC Library Association, and the Urban Libraries Council for their support, and DCPL Director Richard Reyes-Gavilan for bringing this issue to my attention. I think we'd all be remiss if today we did not also pause to congratulate DCPL on winning the Urban Library Council's Top Innovator Award for Library Operations and Management. We know here that DCPL is the best, but it is always nice to get outside confirmation of that as well. Thank you very much. So now we will turn to our public witnesses. I want to offer a note on logistics. I ask all witnesses to limit their testimony to their allotted time. Advisory neighborhood commissioners and the first representative of organizations will each have 5 minutes. Other public witnesses will have 3 minutes to testify. We will start by hearing from public witnesses who are participating in person. After hearing from our in-person witnesses, we will turn to our virtual witnesses. I will call the witnesses who are here in person to testify on a single panel. If you're here to testify when your name is called, please take a seat at the table in front of me. And before you speak, be sure to turn on the microphone in front of your seat. Our first public witness is Angela Goodrich, COO of the Urban Libraries Council. I also have an indication that Salim Adolfo was to testify in person, but I don't see him here. So, Angela, when you are ready, have at it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council Member, and thank you so much for bringing this to DC and also to our attention. I represent the Urban Libraries Council. We bring together 200 of the largest city and county library systems across the US and Canada. Our members represent about 30% of the population. And we really work together to advance education, innovation, and opportunities to help our libraries advance those across our cities and counties. You already mentioned, but I also want to give a shout out to DCPL for being recognized as a 2025 top innovator. You have a great library and a great leadership. They also did some amazing work with us to research the economic impact of central libraries, and particularly after MLK was refreshed to be such a gem for this city and community. When we look at digital technologies today across the US and Canada, and really internationally, we know it has become more and more important to have access for the ways people learn, read, and work today. This is an incredibly important issue, and we've seen exponential growth, particularly since COVID. Our studies show that there is a 35% increase in demand. And then that means that library budgets have a really outsized pressure put on them because e-resources, e-books, audiobooks cost so much more, not just in the print versions, but also the retail versions, multiple times what individuals are buying those for. So it becomes really critical in our communities. While we often think of ebooks and audiobooks as being for people who do not face other barriers in their life, they're actually highly utilized by people who do face barriers. I was recently in a federal government meeting, and a state librarian shared that she and her elderly mother listened to an audiobook together as a way to stay connected. She gets those audiobooks, obviously, from her library. Her mother's unable to read. So this is not just about people who want to read a book on their phone. This is about people who need the technologies in order to engage and access knowledge, education, and be productive in our society. I also just wanted to say that we really do have an outsized cost going on here. Often it is 50% or more of a public library's collections budget now. That significantly impacts then the other materials that they are able to buy. We estimate that ULC members spend $300 million a year right now on ebooks and e-audiobooks, and we know that that pressure is only going to continue. In addition, right now, there aren't any consumer protections. This is specifically important because the licensing is so complex on this issue and because we are purchasing materials that we are often not able to use. So oftentimes, libraries purchase 26 checkouts that expire after a certain time period, and due to just normal holds and other things, they are not able to provide those 26 checkouts because the time period expires. So they're using public funds to purchase items that they are not able to provide to the public because of the terms of the licensing. So we think that this is very critical for all libraries moving forward. When we look at libraries, obviously I represent the large city and county libraries, but this affects all libraries, school libraries, university libraries, and many of the small and rural libraries right now are completely priced out of being able to offer ebooks and audiobooks in rural areas. This becomes compounded by the fact that often these small libraries rely on large libraries and what's called the interlibrary loan to get their books. You are not allowed to do interlibrary loans for the most part with ebooks. So even if a large library has purchased something and has time or access remaining, it cannot loan it to a small library that cannot afford to purchase it at all. So we see this as a real structural issue when we're looking at modern, healthy libraries moving forward. And that is my testimony.
Thank you very much. I don't see Mr. Adolfo. I think I'll proceed to questions with you, and then we will move on to our virtual witnesses. Very complete testimony and covers many of the questions that I had, honestly. But can you talk with me, and I'm going to ask others about this, about the price differential between an ebook and through to the library and to the retail customer? What kinds of studies have you done of that, and what have you found?
Yes. The organization that's done the most studies on that is called Readers First, and they keep an active list on their website of the price differences today. When you heard and you listed some of the prices yourself of $60, $80, $85, even $55, if you or I were to go to Amazon and purchase that, that is being purchased from anywhere from $4.99 to $15.99, maybe $19.99 at the most for a bestseller. So it is a significant price difference being charged to public libraries. Books, print books, do not operate like that. Although there can be some differences because we buy hardier print books with special binding, we're purchasing something different. In this case, we're purchasing the same thing and being charged more.
I hear you on that, and I'm getting a little in front of the whole process, but there is a little bit of a difference because when the library buys the book, it might get lent out a half a dozen times, and then but when someone purchases it on Amazon, they may have one use, or maybe they will share it with somebody. So there's a little bit of a difference. Would you expect any kind of a price differential between libraries and a retail user? What kind of thing is
I
reasonable?
think that they ask right now. We have an ebook solutions group that really has a lot of collections experts on it right now. And we understand that authors, publishers, that this is all part of literacy. We want healthy communities and healthy economies around reading. Some of the things that we think and that the law includes is limits, not on the purchase price as much as on the terms of the licensing that are unfair, particularly if we're purchasing something with a certain amount of uses, we should be able to use it, right? I mean, that's it. We're already paying $55 for 26 uses, but often those uses we're not able to use those, provide those to the public prior to the time limits expiring. So the first thing that we think would be more sustainable is getting rid of the time limits. The other issue for us, and again, a lot of it goes to licensing as well as pricing, is perpetual access. We also have titles that are disappearing. So I'm not sure that I can say what would be completely fair in the marketplace. I think libraries are absolutely open to that discussion. But what I can tell you is what's happening right now is using public funds in a way that is not fulfilling the fiduciary responsibility, and also, really putting a lot of pressure on public libraries. I also believe that it's a model where the industry is obviously trying to get people to buy the books as individuals instead. And while we want a healthy publishing industry, we also need healthy public libraries. We've had a healthy publishing industry selling books to public libraries for years. My members are already spending $300 million. They are consumers of this. What we want are terms that are sustainable, especially as we believe this growth is going to continue to be exponential. And we don't think that just increasing a library's budget is going to bring us to any sort of sustainability on this issue. Many times when there is a leading technology, the cost of things come down over time. And we know that there are a lot of moving pieces in this, but we believe that there could be an industry solution to providing terms that everybody can live with and that create a healthy business environment, as well as really support what is a key function of public libraries, and also really strength of the United States, which is our public libraries.
Thank you very much. I'm the author of this legislation, so I like the fundamental idea. I'm just trying to draw out
Yep.
and anticipate some of the complexity that will be out there, because I do think, you get to a place in a market where one segment of the market is subsidizing another segment of the market. And here, libraries, individual libraries, have very little bargaining and market power vis-a-vis
Correct.
the publishers. And so the publishers have the ability to extract a high rent from the libraries alone. You then have retailers, and I know I will hear from Amazon at some point, who have a lot of market power and who may be able to negotiate with publishers in a different sort of way. And the publishers may be able to give Amazon a price break because they're getting more revenue from the libraries who don't have the market power. So the idea here is to try to create some market power for libraries as institutions. I think lots of people are going to have to give in a ultimate solution. I don't think it's going to be that the price to the library is the same as the price to a retail customer because of the difference. But that doesn't mean there's not an equilibration that should be.
Yeah. And we do have other models for it. We have models from independent publishers. And then I've recently been working on Microsoft Office licensing. And so there's a lot of licensing models out there that understand that public libraries are complex and have a price point set around that. That's fine. But what the legislation does is it really helps us to put pressure that public libraries in the long term can also fulfill their mission, right? Although we haven't seen publishers boycotting public libraries and saying you can't purchase this because it's licensed, they have that ability to do that. They have the ability to remove titles. So the consumer protections go towards where ebooks pricing is incredibly important and a key issue to figuring out for us to sustain this. But our right to purchase the books, to have fair licensing, to be able to talk with each other about those prices is equally as important here. And that's why the law, instead of coming in as like a price cap, like, you can't increase rents more than 3% or something like that, really comes in and addresses, through Kyle and his team, a lot of the key licensing issue, along with the pricing. So we think that there's really a way for this to work out, knowing that I am not a publisher and I can't tell you what would sustain it on their end, but I can tell you that public libraries are very interested in having that conversation and trying to get to models that work.
I really appreciate that. So, and you represent a coalition of libraries, and to how much controversy is there inside of your organization about this kind of initiative? Are you finding that most of your libraries are really hoping that we can do this sort of thing, or is it a deep split?
I think that most of our libraries are hoping we could do this and possibly more. And I think the reality is that we accept that ebooks are going to be different and audiobooks are going to be different, and we have to come up with sustainable models. It was one thing to have these models when this was 5%, 10% of what we were doing or our budgets or services we were providing. But now it is a significant portion of public funds across the United States. So it needs to be addressed. Again, I work for public libraries. I'm not sure exactly what business models would solve it, but I do know that there are some out there. We've heard that there are some school libraries who can purchase books for a price that then there's simultaneous use. So when you think about a book club for public libraries, wouldn't it be great to purchase one thing for $85 or $90 and have multiple people to be able to access that, right? There's some other models. I think the people who want the most, of course, want to go back to book ownership. And I'm not sure we're going to accomplish that here, and that the law isn't trying to accomplish that in the way that we had prior, but obviously that's something that would be more at the federal level and copyright laws. But yeah, so it's really not controversial within the Urban Libraries Council. And I think that all we hear are that there are libraries who would like more to be done on this issue.
Okay, and last question. I was going to ask you questions about particular impact on urban libraries, but I think you touched on that, and I think there's also, the different populations that benefit from this. My wife is a voracious consumer of ebooks and audiobooks, but it isn't. You also cite folks with disabilities,
Yep.
folks who can't read, all of the different potential beneficiaries. One thing that intrigued me was you're with the Urban Library Council and you talked about rural libraries. So can you speak a little bit more about what impact you're seeing in that space?
Yeah. So we have a sister organization called the Association of Rural and Small Libraries. They're a separate organization, and they particularly represent the smallest libraries. This year, we've been doing a lot of work to talk about federal funding for public libraries and why it matters through the Institute of Museum and Library Services. So we've really been partnering with them and state librarians. So pretty much every state has a state librarian or a state library office that handles these federal pass-through funds. And a lot of those pass-through funds, not a lot, but some of them are used to purchase ebooks for small and rural libraries. I was recently on a call with a small library in Texas. Their local budget, total budget to keep the doors open, the internet on, books on the shelf, staff, total budget is $36,000. When we look at the United States, there's about 9,000 public libraries. Most of those have a budget of under $1 million. Half of those have a budget of under $100,000. So you've really got to understand that when we get the chance to come and speak to you, when we get the chance to have people who sit in places of influence, move issues forward, of course, we're going to speak about the entire country and bring those issues forward. So they're just trying to keep the doors open and the internet on. When federal funding was frozen for a time period, it's since been moving forward. There were many rural libraries where their system to check out the books was paid for by state library contracts, and that were paid for by federal funds. So it's been a really important issue that of access across the country. And so that's why I speak about small and rural libraries too. It's really about that ecosystem that creates literacy, that creates workforce development, and promotes democracy.
All right, well, thank you very, very much for your testimony and your passion about libraries, which I share. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before turning to our virtual witnesses, I'd like to provide some guidelines about the use of the Zoom platform. All witnesses participating in this webinar are currently listed as attendees in Zoom. This means your microphones are muted and your cameras are turned off. I will call all virtual witnesses to testify on a single panel. I will call your name and a member of my staff will make you a panelist. If you wish to appear on video, you must click the button in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen that looks like a video camera. Please remain muted until it's your turn to testify. When it is your turn to testify, please unmute yourself. For any technical difficulties, you can send a message to the host, who is labeled as Committee on Human Services, and they will follow up with you. So our virtual public witnesses are Kyle Courtney, eBook Study Group, and Neva Faulkner, Advocacy Chair, DC Library Association.
Hello.
All right, Mr. Courtney, when you're ready to go.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. And thank you for this opportunity to speak on this topic, which has driven much of my work, scholarship, and advocacy over the last decade. And also, I want to join in congratulating DCPL for winning the Top Innovator Award. That's really awesome. So my name is Kyle Courtney. I am a copyright lawyer, a librarian, and the founder and board chair of the group eBook Study Group, a national nonprofit dedicated to ensuring equitable access to information through fair and sustainable library ebook licensing. My day job is at Harvard University, where I serve as Director of Copyright and Information Policy, but I'm appearing today solely in my capacity as board chair of the eBook Study Group. We had drafted the model framework on which this legislation is based, and earlier this year, a version of this approach was enacted into law in Connecticut with overwhelming bipartisan support. And it's now moving through several states. And the district's bill here today is firmly within the same family of consumer protection, contract law reforms, et cetera, designed to ensure that libraries can function in a digital era. Also, all of these ebooks are rented or leased by libraries. I just want to be clear on that, not owned. So I don't really say purchase or buy ebooks, because purchase or buy would give us more rights. We rent them. You know, we're forced to rent or lease them. So this might be more of a landlord-tenant meeting, really. As was noted, DC libraries are facing the same pressures documented nationwide and summarized in the bill's introduction. And I'll say steep price increases, right? Expiring licenses, contractual terms that force libraries to re-rent or release the same material over and over at premium prices. And these, as we heard from my colleague's testimony before, these prices strain budgets. They reduce the number of titles libraries can offer and increase wait times for readers who depend on digital access. Further, the libraries are sort of punished financially for their public-facing mission, right, by having to pay 5 to 10 times as much to rent and re-rent these books more than the average consumer. In short, the convenience of e-access shouldn't come at the expense of the library mission. So this bill is a measured and legally sound response. And I want to note, this is not a copyright bill. I say this as a copyright lawyer, a copyright scholar, and a co-drafter of the restatement on the law of copyright. The bill does not compel publishers to license anything. It simply ensures that once a publisher chooses to license books to DC libraries, the contract cannot contain certain harmful terms that eviscerate the library mission and place commercial objectives above public access. Increasingly, publishers have used license provisions not only to control pricing, but to supplant the traditional role of libraries by dictating how, when, and whether communities may access digital books that are acquired by their libraries. This bill restores that balance by ensuring that libraries, not vendors, can fulfill their public service mandate, including limits on their bans of interlibrary loan, limiting how many copies the library may purchase, requiring the library to pay 5 to 10 times more, prohibiting preservation and access. And this bill also includes an important feature unique to the district, which we first saw in the Connecticut law, the trigger bill, which the trigger mechanism, which is found in both Connecticut and now in this DC bill, and also in a bill in New Jersey is considering currently. And that reduces risk and ensures that DC participates in a coordinated national response rather than acting alone. Publishers have repeatedly warned states that they might withdraw from local publishers if a single jurisdiction adopts the rule or something along those lines. This bill directly addresses that concern while retaining DC's leadership role in this space. Ultimately, this legislation strengthens the ability of DC public libraries to use taxpayer funds responsibly, reduce wait times, and ensure that books and audiobooks, arguably the dominant format for many readers, can be accessed on fair terms. It aligns with long-standing state authority over consumer protection, contracts, procurement, and avoids the pitfalls that caused a previous version in Maryland to be struck down several years ago. I may want to add just one final point here that often arises in these discussions. Publishers do not lose revenue under these ebook contract fairness laws. Libraries will continue to acquire books exclusively from the publishers and their vendors, just as we do today, and they will continue to spend 100% of their designated collection budgets. Nothing in this bill reduces library spending. The only difference is a library may no longer spend $50,000 repeatedly on acquiring the same 50 books over and over. Maybe for that $50,000, they could acquire 500 titles, broadening the market for authors and exposing more readers to more books. Publishers are still paid. Libraries simply get books rather than waste. Every dollar still flows through the commercial marketplace. The library is not asking for a discount. It's asking for a fair contract that allows taxpayer funds to get access, not to purchase the same rights over and over. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Neva Faulkner?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I am here representing the District of Columbia Library Association. DCLA provides opportunities for personal and professional development through networking, participation in committees, interest groups, and the executive board. We also provide programming for new and transitioning information professionals and advocate for local libraries and issues related to library service. We too
Ms.
would like
Faulkner?
to.
Ms.
Yes.
Faulkner, I don't know if it's a choice or you're not on camera. If you wanted to be on camera.
Oh, no, I don't want to be on camera.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we too would like to give a shout out to DC Public Library for winning the Top Innovator Award for 2025. My testimony in support of fair access to electronic library materials. Access to information is a fundamental right, and our public libraries play a critical role in ensuring that that right is realized for all district residents. As reading habits continue to evolve, demand for electronic materials such as ebooks and audiobooks has grown significantly. In the district, usage increased by 18% between fiscal year 23 and 24, outpacing national trends. This shift underscores the importance of ensuring our libraries are equipped to meet residents where they are. Unfortunately, current publisher licensing practices have made it increasingly difficult for libraries to keep up with this demand. Escalating costs, time-limited licenses, and restrictions on circulation mean libraries are paying more while providing access to fewer books. These practices have led to longer wait times, reduced availability, and difficult trade-offs between maintaining print collections and expanding digital access. Ultimately, it is residents, students, seniors, and lifelong learners who bear the burden. This legislation offers a thoughtful and necessary solution. By requiring publishers to negotiate in good faith and prohibiting licensing agreements that restrict public access, the bill helps ensure that public funds are used efficiently and that libraries can place more electronic materials into circulation at fairer prices. It also protects the library's ability to preserve electronic materials for future generations. Importantly, the bill is structured to take effect only as part of a coordinated national effort requiring adoption by other jurisdictions with a significant combined population. This approach strengthens the district's position, minimizes legal risks, and signals a collective commitment to fair access in the digital age. For these reasons, I strongly support this legislation and urge its adoption to protect equitable access to information and to empower our libraries to continue serving the needs of our community. Here are 3 clear positive points drawn from the content you shared. Protects equitable access to information for all residents. The legislation reinforces access to information as a fundamental right by ensuring libraries can meet growing demand for ebooks and audiobooks without unreasonable restrictions, helping residents avoid long wait times and reduce availability. Promotes fair pricing and reasonable publisher practices by requiring publishers to negotiate in good faith and prohibiting restrictive licensing terms. The bill helps control escalating costs, allowing libraries to place more materials in circulation and use public funds, more efficiently. Aligns the district with strong national effort while reducing risk. The delayed implementation tied to adoption by other jurisdictions ensures the district participates in a coordinated nationwide approach to fair digital access, strengthening its position while minimizing legal and market risks. Thank you so much. That is my testimony.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Ms. Faulkner, and to what extent, I mean, it may be that the libraries themselves are hearing this, but to what extent are you hearing from folks who you work with about an increased demand for ebooks and audio books and a frustration with the wait times that people are experiencing?
For me, I'm in the public school sector. I am an employee of DC Public Schools. That's why I did not want to get on camera right now because there's always a lot going on. In terms of ordering ebooks, I do that with the book allotment that I have. So I would not know what my partners think about it. However, I have seen the escalated costs myself, when I'm comparing it and contrasting it to like Amazon opposed to who I order from, which is Macklin. If that
Okay.
makes sense.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your work. I think I'm going to let you get back. Who knows what could happen at 1:40 in the afternoon at a school. So really appreciate your testimony.
You're
Mr. Courtney, you're testifying on behalf of the organization, and you note you're a copyright attorney, and you touched it a couple of times, but just if you can speak to why this is different than the laws in Maryland and New York that have been struck down. And there's been an effort to to get at this issue, and there have been some stumbles around copyright law. Can you speak to how this differs and why we should be able to feel comfortable that this will fly?
Yes, thank you for that question. The core difference is this. Certainly, Maryland, which was struck down, and New York was vetoed because of the Maryland case, tried to force, if you will, publishers to offer ebooks licenses to libraries. This bill does not do that. Maryland's law essentially said, if a publisher offers an ebook to the public here in Maryland, it must also offer a license to libraries on reasonable terms. And the federal court struck that down because it compelled distribution. And court held that only Congress, not a state, can require a copyright holder to license its work. So it's the shall license. New York's bills use the same must law offered, and it was withdrawn or vetoed because it had the same legal risk. At least the governor felt that way. DC's bill, along with the pattern of bills in New Jersey and the law in Connecticut, avoids that problem entirely. It does not require publishers to license anything to the district. Instead, it says if a publisher chooses to license to books to the DC Public Library, then the contract may not contain terms that affect or eviscerate the library mission, such as bans on interlibrary loan, excessive price inflation, forced secrecy, and perpetual rebuy or re-rent, requirements. This is a traditional contract and consumer protection regulation, sort of. It looks like that to me, which states that DC have the full authority to enact. Courts have repeatedly upheld that distinction. There's a second key difference, though, is that the DC bill only takes effect after 10 other states with a combined population of 50 million adopt that substantially similar laws. Obviously, Maryland and New York acted alone and did not have that clause on it. I hope that answers your question, sir.
No, very helpful. A different thing you said, and we worked with others to put this bill forward, so I'm for it. I hope that's clear.
Very clear.
And but you said, one of the things you said is this won't affect publishers, that libraries will still spend the same number of dollars in purchasing books and ebooks. But I'm not sure that's completely true, because I think if you put yourself in the shoes of the publishers, and I'm curious if you've had conversations with the publishers, my expectation is that they would worry that if more people get access to an ebook through a library, fewer of them will purchase them individually, and so there will be an impact. I mean, I don't think we can think there's no impact when you change market dynamics. To what extent have you looked at that, the potential impact? And I guess this all gets into, once there's a negotiation, it is where you would see it. But I would think that along the way, and to the extent you have conversations with publishers, that would be a topic. Can you speak to that dynamic?
Sure. So they haven't brought up the monetary topic in negotiations typically, and they've just made their way through New Jersey recently and said this is in violation of copyright. They're really still towing that particular line. Again, libraries will spend up to their budgets, right? We're not supposed to spend over to our budgets. So libraries are not asking for discounts, which we have great discounts on print products. They'll continue to spend 100% of ebook budget. I think the bill changes how far these dollars will go, not how much is spent, right? So as we heard from our testimony, libraries use large portions of their budget simply to rebuy the same titles over and over again. Release, sorry, I keep doing that. Again, there's no evidence that library lending reduces consumer book sales, and there are some studies on this. We've had a decade of data from Readers First, which was mentioned in the previous testimony, that the trend is actually the opposite. During the years when library digital borrowing exploded, consumer ebook sales also grew, right? Libraries are a discovery engine. A person who borrows the 5th book in a series often goes to purchase the rest. Library exposure is one of the strongest drivers of the publisher's books and author's visibility. And I don't think libraries could ever rent enough copies to replace the retail market. Even if the library wanted to eliminate sales, which of course it does not, it doesn't have that level of budget. Libraries purchase a modest amount of licenses relevant to the total reading population, right? And that depends on city versus urban versus rural. We heard some of that testimony. This bill keeps all existing protections in place for that. There is still all sorts of access. The market is still growing. This is not a bill that turns library lending into free distribution, right? The publishers have said in Connecticut and New Jersey, we can't compete with free. It is not free, right? It preserves the structures publishers rely on, which is the libraries continue to relicense these works. And I guess if I was putting on the shoes of the publishers from the perspective of their own incentives, more reading leads to more sales. Exposure drives demand. Authors benefit and publishers benefit when libraries can introduce their work to more readers. So the bottom line is I don't think publishers lose revenue. Libraries still acquire every title. We do this succinctly just from the publishers. This is not a multi-mode market where you can put something out to bid and hopefully get a good deal. Only one publisher published that one book, right? The difference is that those funds buy access, not repeated releasing of the exact same file. I hope that helps clarify why increased access through libraries does not necessarily cannibalize the retail market world, and historically has tended to strengthen it.
No, I really, really appreciate that. And I actually have heard that from others, but it was good to have that go onto the record. Very helpful. I do think, to the extent that you cited data, that over time, that you made the reference to the explosion of ebooks and Kindle through the libraries, then led to expansion in the private market. That would be
Yeah.
very helpful data to have in the record. So
Sure.
if in following up, you could point us to that data, that would be,
I will be, because I'll be submitting a written testimony along with this as well.
okay, great. And I do think the publishers have to be concerned about an adverse economic impact. They're not opposing this on a whim. They have a belief about what, and I think we want to have a rubric that can address the needs of the publishers, and also data that can help us address the realism of that fear. So very, very helpful. Publishers are one category of folks. Authors are another. I wonder if your group has consulted with authors about how they see this initiative. Authors often, they just want more people to read their books. And
They
so,
do.
but I'm curious what you're hearing from the author community.
Sure. There is no one group that represents all authors, right? So Authors Alliance is one of the groups that we work with. That is a nonprofit. Is similar in the nonprofits that you've talked with here today, including the ebook study group, except they're not just representing libraries, they're representing authors that have relationships. I just want to be clear, libraries do not pay authors directly, right? So that is a private contract that is between the author and the publisher. Authors do absolutely benefit when books reach more readers, and libraries are good at that. In fact, I would argue that the authors that I know and the Authors Alliance, the nonprofit group I work with, has said, like, hey, libraries provide free marketing for all these authors, but we don't pay them, but we disseminate their material. We will host them for book talks. We will do book club readings with them, all of those things. And that's why I think certainly if you said, I wish the publishers paid the authors better, I'd get out in line and stand for that as well, right? Except there's nothing that libraries can do from their position. We will continue to lease these ebooks, which then causes the publisher to pay the author. But we don't know what that rate is. We don't know what those deals are, certainly, but we are in support that fairer license terms actually increase the author exposure rather than concentrating visibility in only the most heavily promoted titles, right? Because current expiring license models force libraries to spend much more money to simply release the same few high demand titles. They have less budget to acquire diverse or emerging voices. So the authors still get paid, the authors still get royalties on every library license, and the authors gain readership, visibility, and long-term discoverability. That's some of the authors that I have talked to that see the really great relationship that exists between authors and libraries.
Great, thank you very much. One of the things that you referred to, the bill has requires 10 other jurisdictions, 50 million, representing 50 million people. You reference Connecticut, us, New Jersey. Are there other states out there that are working on similar things? What does our progress look like to get to 10 states representing 50 million people?
Yes. So I'm an optimist, as you can imagine. If you work as a lawyer for libraries, you have to be an optimist. There are several states that are already moving forward. I mentioned those, but we are in conversations with other states, such as, I mean, these are not secrets, right? Such as Illinois, such as Hawaii, such as Rhode Island. I know New York is also working on one presently. I haven't met with them recently, but I heard that they are doing a review of all their expenditures on ebooks across the state. These all introduced bills previously or are working on the same principles, right? State regulation of ebook contract terms. If we are moving towards state session laws in other states, I know that I have, and the ebook study group has done outreach to other jurisdictions that are also considering bills, which would put us very close to that. I am not as familiar with populations of all states, but I know that the state librarian of Connecticut is, because she is in charge of the authority to certifying those amounts that would trigger the Connecticut law. I would imagine the same here, but if we have 2 or 3 large states immediately go for this in the next term, then the district's bill, I think, would trigger. So there is, I think, a consensus building. If we think about it's a growing tidal wave, and all the boats will float at once, all the states, so that no one has to suffer the fate that Maryland previously suffered.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I very much like the idea of being in the front end of this, but also not being alone in this. And so I think we are trying to strike a balance and feed momentum. So it's good to hear that may be happening. Some of the history, there's the Maryland and New York experience. We also saw references to, I think it's the Senate Finance Committee a number of years ago sent questions to the publishing industry that looked like interesting questions. I think I heard that Ron Wyden's mother, Senator Wyden's mother, was a librarian.
That is absolutely true.
But what happened with those questions? Where does that stand?
Yes. So that was, ebook study group helped with writing some of those questions, obviously. The Senate Finance Committee, we were very pleased that they sent out those questions to go out to the core issue. And they were technical questions. In order to gain a response to those questions, the congressional offices had to provide confidentiality to that. So we have been unable to read those specific answers from the major 5 publishers. And so we had to settle for a summary. I would love if those were released. I would say that the Finance Committee asked normal oversight questions. I heard they were answered fully, but nevertheless, we don't actually have those particular answers. I'm sorry to say.
But do you have a summary?
Other than they all responded.
That's the summary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I was equally, I'm a librarian and a lawyer. I dig transparency, but I also respect confidentiality. I think in order to get them to answer the questions, they had to promise some things. And if I was an attorney working at one of those publishers, I might do the same thing. So I don't fault the confidence, but I would really think that those answers would help us. But nevertheless, the ESG persisted, and we've gone forth and helped other libraries in other states as well, even without that data.
All right. Well, okay. Well, thank you very much. This has been very helpful in terms of that, getting data on the basis of confidentiality. Been there, done that. It's awkward.
It is.
Everybody wants to know the answer, and you can't share it. Otherwise, you'll never get another answer. So in any case, thank you very much for your work on this. Thank you very much for your testimony. And I think we will now move to our government witness.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are now joined by Richard Reyes-Gavilan, Director of the District of Columbia Public Library. And I'm sorry, remind me.
London Gillespie, Director of Collections for DCPL.
Wonderful. It is the practice of this committee to place our government witnesses under oath. Would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you are about to provide to the Committee on Human Services is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may begin your testimony.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council Member Fruman, staff, I am Richard Reyes-Gavilan, Executive Director of DC Public Library. I'm pleased to deliver testimony in support of B26-0490, the Library eBook Pricing Fairness Amendment Act of 2025. I'm here today not only on behalf of our library system, but really on behalf of the thousands of district residents who rely on equitable access to digital content, access that is increasingly threatened by unfair and unsustainable ebook licensing practices. This proposed legislation represents a thoughtful and strategic approach to a national problem. By conditioning DCPL's participation on the passage of similar legislation in at least 10 other states, representing at least 50 million residents, the bill recognizes the power of collective action. It sends a clear message to publishers. Libraries are not passive consumers, but essential public institutions that deserve fair treatment in the digital marketplace. Currently, libraries are often forced to pay and are subject to restrictive licensing terms that limit how and for how long we can lend digital materials. These practices not only strain our budgets, but also undermine our mission to provide free and open access to information for all. In fiscal year 2019, DC Public Library spent $655,500 on ebooks. That amount represented 11% of our overall collections budget. DCPL circulated 1.58 million digital items that year. In FY25, the library spent $1.62 million on ebooks, almost 3 times as much as in 2019. That amount represented 34% of our overall collections budget. DCPL circulated 3.74 million digital items in FY25. Somehow, the wait time for ebooks was still longer in FY25, 46 days, than it was in FY19, 45 days, demonstrating how popular ebooks have become, especially as a result of the reading disruption that occurred during the pandemic, and also demonstrating that DCPL simply cannot meet the demand for electronic books. During that 7-year span, the library's collections budget has pretty much remained constant, save for a few years with infusions of one-time funding for opening day collections for new libraries. You can imagine, because of flat budgets, ebook pricing and licensing restrictions, and a continued demand for print books, especially for children, that our approach to buying books will have to change. Choosing between, and I should not say buying, it is absolutely renting or licensing. Choosing between licensing ebooks and buying print books is a losing proposition for libraries, but one that we are increasingly being forced to make. There are a host of reasons different readers prefer one format over another, and it's not our goal to pick favorites. As our collections dollars stagnate or decrease and the cost of ebooks increases when compared to print books, we will need to begin prioritizing print books because they're cheaper, they last longer, there are no artificial limits on the number that can be purchased, and they can incentivize physical visits to our libraries that offer so many other services in addition to books. We will need to be comfortable with the fact that for adults especially, the convenience of ebooks, available instantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, will be disregarded because of dwindling collections budgets and increased ebook acquisition costs. Typically, libraries like to make it easier for residents to access books. We are approaching a scenario in which we will make a conscious effort to make it more difficult. The district has long been a leader in digital equity. From our robust and well-used Wi-Fi signals to our investments in digital literacy, we have worked to ensure that every resident, regardless of income, age, or ability, can participate fully in the digital world. But our efforts are hampered when publishers impose restrictive barriers to access. Librarians understand that authors and publishers need to earn a living and that unlimited, unrestricted access to ebooks in perpetuity is not a model that is sustainable for them. Without some friction, there would be little incentive for anyone to ever actually buy an ebook, and that is what the big publishers have long argued. With that said, the current model imposed on libraries seems almost arbitrary, if not punitive, and disregards the important role libraries play in fostering a love of reading and in the promotion and marketing of authors and books, all of which we do at no cost to publishers. We would like for there to be good faith negotiation that continues to turn a profit for publishers and authors, but also allows libraries to get more value for the amount we are spending each year on electronic content. We appreciate the committee's measured and forward-thinking approach to this legislation and thank the committee for consulting DCPL as the legislation was being crafted. In closing, I would also like to caution the precedent this sets in legislating purchasing decisions of an independent public library. If we get to the point where the 10-state, 50 million residents threshold is reached, I would like to continue working with the committee on possible amendments to ensure we are not depriving district residents of reading materials. Thank you for inviting me to testify. I am joined this afternoon by London Gillespie, DC Public Library's new Director of Collections, and we are happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of the phenomena that was described by some of the previous witnesses is licensing agreements that are time limited, and then you have to give back the rights. And I'm curious to what extent that's been happening for DCPL. Have we gotten the right to distribute a book 10 times and paid for it, and then only to have it distributed 3 times, and so we get no value out of that payment for the 7 other times?
Well, most of our ebooks are metered access, so there is some limit, whether it's 26 circulations or 3 years or both. So invariably, what you're describing is a common occurrence. By hook or crook, we will be losing access to the material. And if it's a 3-year license, not metered by circulation, then, it could be 3 people, 5 people, 7 people. So that's absolutely occurring. And London, please feel free to chime in with anything else that you might know in more detail.
I would just add that, like Rich said, like sometimes it's the amount of time, but also sometimes it's the number of checkouts. So there's not consistency in that. Like we get multiple modules that we have to deal with. So some are like time, some are checkouts. So it depends.
So to what extent are those purchases negotiated, and to what extent are they presented to you as your sole option?
Pretty much, I defer to you, but it's sole option. This is the take it or leave it model.
Yes, yes.
Have you ever tried to negotiate, said, oh, we'd really like to do that, but we would need to have a different price or different terms?
For different types of books, especially some that may not be as popular, we can bundle, we can do some book bundling. At certain times, I remember at the height of the summer of 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, we were able to package a bunch of ebooks that describe sort of the race relations in the country, and we were able to, for a short time, provide unlimited, unfettered access to these materials, which is really a highlight of our year in that we were able to provide that much access. So there are models in which we do this, and London and her team are really creative about trying to leverage those whenever possible. But I think that the high demand, like #1 bestseller type stuff, there's no real negotiation to be had there.
Okay, and in your testimony, you talked about this might be the ebook digital access might be a thing that would be cut if we can't get changes, either bring down the cost of it or increase the amount that you're able to spend on circulation, both goals for me. But when there's the expression, first you close the libraries, and which seems funny to say here as a way of like increasing budget pressure to get something fixed. But why would you do that in this space that is so popular? Why would this be the place that you would cut?
That's a fair question. And as first of all, as I indicated in my testimony, we get much more value for print books. I mean, there's just no way around that. We've got books that circulate hundreds of times over the course of their lifetime on our shelves. maybe I'm, showing my age, but I do think that having books on the shelves do incentivize visits to our buildings, and the vast majority of our overall budget is keeping our buildings open. So we don't want to put ourselves out of business by offering everything virtually. There's also, if you dig deeper, you'll see that there are sort of socioeconomic differences in how ebooks are accessed. So relatively speaking, for example, in Ward 7 and 8, there's very little ebook penetration. So, the last thing we would want to do is, punish folks who don't use ebooks because they, may not have the technology to access them. They may not have the digital literacy skills to access them. There may not be the content available digitally that is of interest to them. And so prioritizing ebooks, I think, may be unfair. I think if we concentrate on print books in a scenario where we have to choose, I think that we are, in a strange way, we are preserving access for most.
Okay, very, very helpful to hear that. I do think we want to increase access to these sorts of resources everywhere in the city, but it's not the reality right now. So the real goal is to achieve that and have more folks in every part of the city be able to benefit from this kind of technology. And the future is coming. And so we're kind of likely to see more and more ebooks. I'm with you. I'm older than you, but similar generation. I like the newspaper in my hand. I like the
Yeah, and certainly what I'm proposing is not a sustainable model, right? Because we don't want to also ensure obsolescence. Like, we understand that ebooks continue to be a preferred format. But, if there were something that we had to do this coming year, for example, to address a cut to our collections budget, which, I'll be quite honest, our budget in 2015 for books was $4.7 million. Our budget in 2025 for books was $4.7 million. So in a decade, we did not get an additional dime for ebooks. We've had, as I mentioned in my testimony, some infusions for opening day collections, and a healthy one in 2019 for the opening of the MLK Library in 2020. But the base budget has remained flat. And this is, all books have gone up in price, not just ebooks. So this is something else that we are contending with, is that, and I've testified before, council member, relative to other comparable cities like Denver, Boston, Columbus, Ohio, our collections budget is lower than those cities that serve a comparably sized population.
No, you made that case compellingly, tried to help. Touche, to take the opportunity here to preview budget testimony, oversight testimonies.
You can knock them both out right now if you want. I've got all the data for 25.
Would that I could. Actually, I'm going to be curious about the data for 2025. But one of the things that was referred to as interlibrary loan, and actually as a certain, you can take this in a couple of different directions, but in terms of circulation budget, I wonder to what extent that puts us at risk in interlibrary loan if we can't be a full partner, if we're not bringing to the table as much as we should, but also in the ebook and audiobook space, if you did make cuts in that space and that was an important space in the interlibrary loan space, how does that all fit together? How do you think about that?
Technically, we have different definitions for interlibrary loan. An interlibrary loan is a program that in its strictest term is us maybe lending a book to somebody in San Diego who doesn't have access, and it happens to only be in DC. The bigger issue for us when I think of interlibrary loan is I think of the reciprocal borrowing agreements that we have with a number of jurisdictions around DC, Prince George's, Alexandria, so on and so forth. Right now, just because, we all have the same mission and we talk all the time and we just want to get as many books into the hands as many people as possible, we do have unrestricted borrowing ability. So if I live in Alexandria, I can borrow ebooks from DC, and if I live in DC, I can borrow ebooks from Alexandria. One thing that we have also been considering, depending on how this plays out with our budgets, is maybe being a little bit more restrictive or being a little bit more strategic about who's a net lender and who's a net borrower. For the most part, over the past 10 years since ebooks have become popular, we haven't really done that level of analysis, but I think it might be time to do that.
All right, well, let's put a pin in that in the oversight process, because maybe we'll ask about that, because, I mean, I think we want the region to be strong. We want to build collaboration. We want to be a good partner. And that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. In terms of fiscal year 25 and to date in fiscal year 26, you noted the dollar amount DCPL spent on digital materials in FY 25, but do you know how many ebooks DCPL licensed in fiscal year 25?
Yes, we do. It's, I knew this was going to happen. 54,477 is how many books we've licensed. And just to give you a little bit of perspective, that's for the past 4 fiscal years, we've roughly been acquiring just north of 50,000 titles. And we compare that to not that long ago, maybe 2015 through 18, we were acquiring about 15,000 titles per year. So used to be about 15,000, and then now we're at about 50,000.
And that's in FY 25.
Yes.
And then how much did we spend in FY 25? Was it 3.4 million?
How much did we spend?
For digital and
1.6 million.
25, 1.6.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about FY 26? What does it look like so far? I know it's early, but and do you try to do much of your purchasing at the beginning of the fiscal year so you have it, or where do we stand?
Books are always being published, so we spend as we get it. Yeah, but you have 26 data, I think.
Yes, so this far in fiscal year 26, we spent a little over 200,000 because we did have about 40,000 in content credit that we've been using. So a little over 200,000 so far.
Okay, great. And what are in terms of circulation, what does it look like in this fiscal year, physical versus digital? Do you have any sense of what that data is?
0.5.
Well, 25 and
26 is only 2 months old.
months
So
old,
for a full year, it's maybe better context. Our circulation for FY 25 was 3.1 million circulations of print material. And that factors in renewals as well. So if you want to keep a book, the way libraries define it is that's also a circulation. We also keep track of first checkout, which means the very first and only, the very time you do it once. So anyway, it was 3.1 million for print and 3.7 for digital. It's been a few years now that digital has surpassed print in circulation.
Interesting. And back in 2015, what did that look like?
2015, I've got digital. I don't have print. Digital, it was, 15,000 or so, the circulation?
And I don't have the circulation.
Oh, we've got titles. How about 2018?
Fair.
Which
2018 works for me.
For us, 2018 and 19 are good years to benchmark because a lot of our thinking is pre and post pandemic. So the circulation in 2018 for digital was about $1.3 million, and just a little bit more in FY19, and then it spikes by FY21 because of the pandemic.
Okay, great. So I asked you about interlibrary loan and the reciprocal agreements. Do you have any conversations with the folks in the libraries in the region about this phenomenon of the challenge of getting access and the restrictions on access to ebooks and audiobooks?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we probably have separate conversations with the folks on the ground who are buying and trying to figure out new ways of getting things more efficiently and more cheaply. Certainly, DC Public Library is a proud member of the Urban Libraries Council. We have a meeting, standing meeting every Thursday afternoon where, you know, anywhere from 20 to 50 to 70 of us join a new topic every week. Ebooks, digital access is a topic that we talk about all the time. Certainly any conference that you go to, ebook licensing is a topic that we talk about a lot. You know, it's clearly because of the strain on our budgets, in addition to other strain. I mean, DC has been very fortunate over the years because of the great support from the council and the mayor, so that our buildings look great and we've been well staffed for the most part. You know, we have been fortunate, but you know, you speak to other cities that have not had huge investments in their physical infrastructure, have not had great investments in staffing, and then they're layering on these issues with licensing. Obviously it's going to be top of mind for them. And feel free, London, to talk about what the practitioners talk about.
So like the electronic resource librarian who purchases, she's constantly looking at what's going on, the trends in the fields, and she's having conversations with her counterparts, but the collections directors are also having conversations. Rich is attending ULC meetings, I'm attending ULC meetings on a director level, just to continue the conversation. What are we gonna do? Strategizing on what we would like to see. If anything, we haven't really landed on something we all agree on yet, but you know, we're having the conversations for sure.
All right, well, wonderful. So I guess I'm gonna end by commenting on your comment at the end about, you know, when we get there, which we're not there yet. And maybe it's right to pull the curtain back, or maybe wrong, but I mean, the genesis of this is you sent me a text with a link to the story about, I don't know if it was Rhode Island or Connecticut, and then lo and behold, we came forward with legislation, and you were like, "Whoa, dude!" Like and I get a little bit of trepidation,
And that's what I just wanted to highlight.
and I get the philosophy of the independence of the libraries and the precedent that you're talking about. So absolutely will want to be a partner with you going forward. On the other hand, there is a need to create market power and some leverage to get to negotiations. And it's a little scary, like after you, Alphonse, but that's why we have this idea of 10 states and 50 million people. And so let's stay together, but also keep the pressure on so that we could get to a better framework.
And no disagreement, council member. I'm just laying out that there is the slight risk involved if, you know, this legislation is benevolent, and we appreciate being able to work with you all on crafting it. And I did send you the article over the summer and said, look at this. This is pretty interesting. So that last comment is just, you know, I'm putting a future library director in front of a future council that may not be as friendly. And the future council says, well, hey, in 2025, the council introduced and passed legislation that prohibited how you do this. So this is just building upon that, and maybe not in a benevolent way, the way you are, the way this legislation is crafted. So it's just an asterisk, really, that especially in a city like DC that is always worried about its autonomy. Yeah.
No, I totally hear you. An asterisk to your asterisk, that I could imagine we get to a place where a number of states have a threshold like ours, and we're in a moment.
Yeah, for sure.
And I could imagine a painful or frightening 3 to 6 month period where folks were trying to hammer it out. And I don't want to pull a plug too soon. I think when we get there, that's the start of a negotiation process.
Yeah,
And I think we want
completely
to
agree.
follow through on that.
Completely agree.
All right. Enough asterisks. Thank you very much for your testimony. I think that this concludes today's public hearing. For those who are watching or following the record, if you plan on submitting written testimony for the record, please do so by uploading it to the council's online hearing management system before the record closes at 5 p.m. on January 5th, 2026. The time is now 2:25, and this hearing is adjourned.